Hey there. You know we love a good, thought-provoking research rabbit hole, and you sent us a fascinating one this time. This is going to be a fun deep dive because we're using Borges today to help us really wrap our heads around large language models and AI. Right. Definitely aha moment territory. See, this paper we're diving into, it asks whether LLMs are less about like actual intelligence and more like his Garden of Forking Paths idea.
Okay, I see where this is going, yeah.
Like, they can keep spinning out these plausible continuations of text, but do they get the truth behind it?
It's a really interesting question to ask, right?
Yeah.
Especially because the way LLMs are built, training on these absolutely massive data sets, learning patterns, transformations. I mean, it echoes some of the work of linguists like Zelig Harris.
Oh, tell me more about that. I'm not familiar with him.
He was playing around with sentence transformations, like how you could shift a sentence grammatically, but keep the core meaning the same. LLMs are doing that, but on a scale he probably couldn't have even imagined.
Wow. But they don't really care if it's true, just if it's plausible, right? Within that system of language they've built for themselves.
Exactly. And that's where the paper makes this brilliant connection back to Borges' idea of a perfect language model.
Okay, you're going to have to remind me about that one.
So imagine this system with every single possible combination of words in it, every narrative thread you could possibly think of. It's like that book Borges imagined.
I'm getting chills. So does that mean LLMs are just dot machines for writing fiction?
In a way, yeah. Think of it like you input a few words and the machine adds more. You're building a story together, like those old choose-your-own-adventure books.
Oh my gosh, but on a massive scale. I love those books.
Right. But you know how sometimes those stories go in totally unexpected directions?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's where we get these hallucinations.
Yeah.
Though, the paper makes a case for calling them confabulations instead.
Interesting. So what's the difference? They both mean like not accurate, right?
Yeah, but it's about where those inaccuracies come from. Confabulations happen because the LLM is pulling from this huge but flawed memory, filling in gaps with what fits the narrative, not necessarily with reality.
I've totally done that now that you mention it.
Right. It's like getting lost in a Wikipedia rabbit hole. You start with one thing, and suddenly you're clicking link after link and end up in this bizarre corner of the internet.
Yeah.
You followed a path, but is it accurate?
And that's what the paper is worried about with LLMs, right?
Exactly. That we get so caught up in these plausible narratives that we forget to check if they're actually true.
It's like we're building these incredible fiction machines, but then forgetting they're fiction machines.
Yeah. And it made me think of Borges's Library of Babel. You know, that library with every single possible book in it. That's kind of the world these LLMs live in, right?
Yeah.
But like, there's no card catalog to tell you what's true and what's made up.
Oh, that's perfect. So how do we even begin to navigate that? Because just having more information doesn't equal more meaning. If anything, it makes it harder to find.
And that's where the paper brings in this idea of librarians. And they're not talking about the people who like shush you at the library.
Thank goodness.
Right. These librarians are more like people devoting their lives to searching this library, hoping they'll stumble on some hidden truth, some vindication in all those endless stacks of books.
It's like they're looking for proof, some kind of validation from the library itself.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of what we do with LLMs now? Think about the people who spend hours chatting with a chatbot.
Looking for a connection, for sure. I know I've gone down some rabbit holes.
Totally. But the paper is saying, hey, be careful with that, because LLMs, they're masters of mimicry.
Oh, they're good. Scary good sometimes.
They've learned how to sound like us by analyzing this massive amount of human language. But let's be honest, we're not exactly the most objective species.
And that's putting it lightly.
Right. So these LLMs can easily end up reflecting our own biases right back at us, even if those biases are based on, like, nothing.
It's giving Funhouse Mirror, for sure. What you see looks like you, but distorted.
Yes. And that's where the paper introduces this idea of purifiers, the folks who think some ideas are just too dangerous to even be in an LLM's repertoire, like they need to be purged from the system.
I mean, on the one hand, you can see where they're coming from. No one wants more misinformation or hate speech out there, right?
Right. But then the paper throws in this curveball. Who gets to decide what's safe and what isn't?
Yeah, because controlling information like that, that's a lot of power. And we know power can be easily abused.
Exactly. What starts as trying to, like, protect people could easily become censorship, a way to silence voices, you know?
And it made me think of that line in the Library of Babel where it talks about humanity on the verge of extinction, but the library lives on. Chills, right?
So good. and so relevant. It makes you think twice about which one's actually in control here.
Right, like who's really calling the shots here? It's kind of terrifying if you think about it too much.
Totally. But before we get too existential on everyone, the paper does offer this little glimmer of hope. And it has to do with storytelling, of all things.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
Because that feels like a big leap from like AI overlords to the power of a good story.
Right. But what if LLMs, at their core, are kind of like the next evolution of storytelling?
Okay, I kind of see what you mean.
Because think about it. LLMs, just like any good storyteller, they're amazing at exploring tons of different possibilities, rewinding, replaying, generating all these variations on a narrative, branching out in new directions.
It's like those choose your own adventure books again, but instead of just a few branches in the story, it's practically infinite.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
And just like what makes those stories so much fun is that they make us think differently, right? See things from new angles.
Totally. It's like suddenly you're seeing all these possibilities you never would have thought of before.
And that's what this paper is trying to get us to see with LLMs, I think.
Hmm.
It's not just about the scary stuff like the biases and the misinformation. It's about what we could create with them.
I'm with you. Like, imagine the possibilities for writers or historians. What if we could use LLMs to, like, model different historical outcomes?
That would be incredible. Or
Yeah.
artists collaborating with AI to push the boundaries of what's even possible.
Okay, but this is where it gets tricky, right? Because, like any tool, language, AI, it all comes down to how it's actually used.
100%. We can't just be passive consumers of whatever these systems spit out.
Right, because the real danger isn't some Terminator-style AI takeover.
It's us just giving up our own ability to think for ourselves.
Wow, yeah. So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to do with all of this?
Well, I think the paper leaves us with a really, really big question, and it's one we all need to be thinking about. Can we find that balance
Hmm.
between using LLMs for good, for creativity, for exploration, but not letting them control the narrative of our lives?
That's quite the challenge, but one worth tackling, right? These technologies are here to stay, whether we like it or not.
Definitely. And their impact on us, on how we understand ourselves and the world around us, that's just getting started.
So much to think about. We'll have links to all the research we talked about in the show notes if you want to go down your own Borges and AI rabbit hole.
It's a fun one. I highly recommend it.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder it all. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.